The second test is the bitterness test. Every man is going to be used and abused repeatedly throughout his life. If you are a man, you're gonna have people fail you, lie about you. They're gonna gut you at work. They're gonna dishonor you at home. Extended family are going to harass you. We live in a world where many men are just seething with bitterness because if you're a strong man, they say you're toxic. So then if you become a weak man, they say that you're too weak. Either way that you go, you're the tender guy or the tough guy. Either way, you're the criticized and opposed guy. Guys go through their whole life and they just collect a series of offenses and bitternesses. And let me just say, the culture we're in, it doesn't help at all. One of the worst things that happened in Gideon's life, he failed his bitterness test. Someone he loved died and he didn't forgive and he went into vengeance and anger. I'll read it to you. Here's his bitterness test. Gideon said, they were my brothers, guys who died in battle. And so he's processed this as murder, but the truth is, if you're at war as a soldier, that's not exactly a murder. The sons of my mother, and as the Lord lives, if you've saved them alive, I would not kill you. This is vengeance. He's now gonna murder some guys. And hear me in this, he's a man of God. He's in Hebrews 11, kind of the heroes of the faith chapter. So he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise and kill them. Now he's putting his bitterness in his son. Your dad's bitter, you be bitter. Your dad's gonna do evil, you help him. But the young man did not draw a sword, for he was afraid because he was still a young man, a little boy. Then Zebah and Zalmunna, the enemies, said, rise yourself and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna. That's murder, okay? He's bitter. You, in war, killed my brothers. Therefore, I will seek vengeance and murder you. Bitterness is demonic. Most men have innately wired in us a sense of justice, correct? You're at work, somebody steals from you and they're a customer or client, you're like, that was wrong. If somebody you're dealing with is doing illegal things and breaking the law, like, that's criminal. If somebody says they're a Christian and they're not obeying the Bible, you're like, that is sin and disobedience. There's something that God has hardwired in men because we're made in his image and likeness that we like justice. When we don't get justice immediately, there's an opportunity for us to fail this test of bitterness. In bitterness, sometimes it's referred to as unforgiveness or disappointment or woundedness or brokenness, holding a grudge, being offended, or just plain old hurt. You know that you're bitter when you can't talk about someone or something without escalating in emotion, especially anger. As a man, if you find yourself getting angry talking about someone or something, there's probably bitterness there. And all of a sudden you could sort of sense it and feel it. Your blood pressure is rising, your voice is escalating, and all of a sudden your words become very focused and a bit caustic. And what happens is Satan and demons, they gain strongholds in a man's life through bitterness. Just verbal process for a minute. So something happens and you feel that you were wronged. Then if you don't forgive and instead you choose bitterness, what you've just done, you've opened yourself, and what Gideon did here, he opened his family to the demonic. And so hear me in this. Heaven is a culture of forgiveness. Hell is a culture of unforgiveness. All the forgiven people go to heaven. All the unforgiven people go to hell. When you feel offended, when you feel treated unjustly, and men, we feel this, right? How many of you right now, just be honest, right now you're like, yeah, I feel right now like somebody owes me. Somebody has wronged me. Somebody has frustrated me. Somebody deserves to be punished for what they've done and or doing to me, okay? When those moments hit, if you choose unforgiveness and bitterness, you're literally inviting the demonic culture of hell up into your life. And what he does here, he then involves his son. He's gonna make his bitterness a generational curse. Son, your dad is bitter. Let me put that bitterness on you. Let's work together. If you'd like to feel close to your dad, the only way you can feel close to your dad is if you're doing bitter evil with your dad. He's now going to build the relationship with his son through bitterness and evil. Do you want that for your legacy? No. And the point here is, if you have bitterness, you're going to put it on your son. This is how sins become generational curses. The other option is when you feel wronged or something unjust has happened, then it is forgiving. And when you forgive, you're not pulling hell up into your life, you're inviting heaven down onto your life. What Gideon should have done in this moment, and it can be very hard in the most emotional moments. He's frustrated, he's angry. Someone he loves has died. He's got to go to the funeral. All he wants is vengeance. But at the end of the day, had he forgiven them, he would have allowed God to deal with them. And what God had just allowed him to do was to defeat, 125, I think, thousand soldiers with 300 men. God just proved, if you let me do the fighting, I'll fight for you. You don't need to fight for yourself. In that moment, if Gideon would have worshiped God, God would have justified Gideon. Let me say this. I don't think I've ever met a man who doesn't have bitterness. I don't think I've ever met a man that doesn't have bitterness. And I'll just talk to you a little bit about this. Here's what forgiveness is not and is. Forgiveness is the opposite of vengeance. What Gideon does here is vengeance. You killed some guys I care about, I'm going to kill you. That's vengeance. In addition, forgiveness allows you to shift your focus from that person to your God. See, what Gideon is doing in this moment, he's very hurt because people he loves died in war. Rather than looking up to God, he's looking out at them. If he would look up to God, then God could deal with them. And if you're at a place in your life when you're almost obsessed with someone, your ex-wife who did you wrong, the girlfriend who cheated on you, the chick who dumped you, the boss who canned you, if you're thinking about them, if you're ruminating on them, if you are even on social media or practically trying to get information about them, you need to know that you have stopped fixing your eyes on Jesus. And all of a sudden, you have made them the center of your life. And a lot of your reality is going to be pursuing justice and vengeance for them rather than a relationship with him. You can't look up to him and look out at them. When you become bitter, you decide, I'm no longer looking up to him, I'm looking out at them. And this is where you'll see men just become very dark, very cold, very hardened. If you know a man who's been bitter for an extended period of time, he doesn't really see the Lord anymore. He only sees those who have hurt him or might hurt him. In addition, forgiveness, is it something, let me ask the seasoned guys, is forgiveness something you do once and then you move on? No. They came to Jesus and they asked him, Jesus, some guys say one time, some guys say 70. Those are the real nice guys. They're like, what's the number? He said, 70 times 7. Sometimes you forgive someone and then they do it again. Okay? 70 times 7. Sometimes you find out some things and you forgive them and then you find out there's more to the story. I was talking to a guy recently. He said, I found out my wife was committing adultery on me, ran off. He said, the longer it goes, the more I realize it wasn't a guy, it was a parade. You know what that is? 70 times 7. 70 times 7. And sometimes you forgive someone, but then the consequence of their behavior shows up later, and you got to forgive them at a deeper level. Right? All of a sudden, let me say it this way. This is always a verbal process sermon. But let's say you've got a bad dad who was violent, abusive, or absent, and you reach the point where you forgave him. Then when you become a dad and you're holding your kid, there's a whole nother level of forgiveness. Dad, how could you lay hands on me? Dad, how could you leave? How could you bail? How many of you, again, don't raise your hand, but once you held your kid, you're like, man, my dad was more screwed up than I thought. Right? I mean, if he could do that to me, now that I'm a dad, I realize how broken and how dysfunctional and how horrific that is. And so it is a 70 times 7 process. In addition, what happens when you forgive, you get out of the middle. See, there's God in them, and if you're bitter, you're in the middle. Get out of the middle. Let God heal you. Let God deal with them. And let me say this, God deals with everybody. He's just more patient than we wish. How many of you wish that God was less patient with them? Okay? See, what we love about God is like, God's so patient with me. God, why are you so patient with them? Right? He's patient with everybody, but God will deal with them. I've been doing this long enough. I've seen God give incredible patience to me and incredible patience to others. And sometimes I've seen God give such patience to my enemies that it's really quite shocking. Their heart changes, they meet Jesus, and they get healed, they get better. Right? Okay. And other times, man, an anvil drops out of the sky on their life, and God just takes care of it. Either way, if you're bitter, you're going to determine the outcome. If you forgive and let God deal with them, I promise you this, the outcome will be something that you'll thank God for, because that will have been the will of God.
Howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.